So this is intended to be a very brief introduction of some of the items you may want to consider if getting into climbing. This is according to my experience, and this may differ depending on where you live and what you have available to you. Here we've got a plethora of places to go climbing. In fact, we have world-class climbing right in my backyard is what I like to think of it as, so that's kind of fun for me. Again, this is intended to be a very basic idea of what is needed to get involved in sport climbing. And guys, by all means, this is not an inclusive selection of gear. Just like anything else, there's tons of stuff to look at. Each piece of gear that I'll discuss in this video could actually be made into its own video and easily be made into a 15-minute segment. So again, this is just a brief overview. Okay, again, a very brief overview of the harness and the quick draws, your chalk bag, and your runners. Now let's get into some of these things a little more specific. First thing we're going to talk about is ropes. Some things you want to focus on when looking at ropes is the diameter, length, and you want to make sure if you're sport climbing that it is a dynamic rope as opposed to a static rope. I'll go over that in just a minute. The diameter of the rope, typically what I've been using is anywhere from a 10.5 to 11. You can actually millimeters, 10.5 to 11 millimeter rope. Again, that's the diameter. With this purple rope, you can kind of see it's just a little bit smaller than the blue rope on this side. And advantages to going smaller is weight. But most of my experience with sport climbing is I haven't been walking a long distance, so it's just not a huge issue with me. Now, canyoneering, when you're hiking 9 hours a day, that's a much different story with the weight. The next factor you want to consider is the length of the rope. Again, guys, this is just going off my experience. Where I've been up climbing is 60 meters is what you want to go with. That's the bare minimum I would go with. 60 meters is a 200-foot rope, but even in the Americas when you go, they're pretty much labeled in meters. So 60 meters is what you want to focus on. And with dynamic rope, what dynamic rope is it's kind of a stretchy rope for rock climbing. And what that does is that absorbs the fall as opposed to a static rope that doesn't have a lot of elasticity to it. So in sport climbing you will take falls. Generally speaking, they're not very far, generally speaking. If you're lead climbing, you might take a fall, a longer fall, but if you're just climbing and it's already been top roped for you, your fall should be very minimal if your belayer is paying attention. But using a dynamic rope, that rope's going to stretch for you and absorb some of that impact. So when you tighten that rope, it's not going to be the sharp jerk on you. So again, that's what you want to do. Is you want to look for 60 meter rope, anywhere from 9 to 11 millimeters. That's kind of, you can go outside that if you want, but generally that's what I've used. And you want to get a dynamic rope. Another issue you might want to consider in getting ropes is buying a dry rope or a water-resistant rope. I often find myself in waterfalls. I often find myself climbing at the base of rivers, and the rope inevitably is going to get wet. Other things you want to consider is when purchasing a rope, some ropes will come with a bag. This actually folds up. It just looks like a duffel bag by the time you get it folded up, but it keeps the rope inside, and when you lay it out like this, it allows you to put the rope on top instead of directly in the dirt. It's kind of a cardinal sin amongst climbers in my area to step on your rope while out, and the reason that is when you step on the rope, what it does is it starts to grind the little pebbles, the little dirt particulates inside the rope, and that will age your rope faster. And the ropes aren't cheap, guys. You're looking at least $100. If you can find a rope for $100, a good rope, that's a steal. You're going to be looking anywhere from, I'd say, $120 to $200 for a decent rope. Climbing shoes. There are many different styles and makes of climbing shoes. If you want to make a comparison to, say, firearms, handguns to be specific, you have 5-inch barrels, you have 3-inch barrels. These are made for different things. Climbing shoes are no different in that they have different styles of climbing shoes that are meant to do different styles of climbing or methods of climbing. If you're just getting into climbing, what you want to do is look for a pair like this. These are Mad Rock, and they're very inexpensive as climbing shoes go. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, these are expensive, period. I think I got these on sale for about $80 when I got them. So, as climbing shoes go, they're not cheap. But these are a good beginner pair. And you know what? I've found that that's all I've needed. I can't afford to go out and buy 70 different pairs of shoes, so I'll stick with the ones I have. There are some opinions out there. You know, generally these are kind of considered noob shoes, but I wear them, they work, they satisfy what I need them to do. You want to make sure they fit very tight on your feet, and I do not wear socks with my climbing shoes. I just go straight bare feet. Some guys might wear a very thin pair of socks. I choose not to, and most of the people I've climbed with just go bare feet. ATCs. This is what you're going to run the rope through when climbing. You're going to be the belayer, so you're going to be on the bottom, and what you're going to do, the rope's going to go only through one of these and connect to a locking biner that's attached to your harness and go up to the climber. And this is going to enable you to feed them and, more importantly, break the rope when they fall, or if they need to hang dog on the rope, or they sit on the rope. There's different styles of these, and there's some that are completely different configuration. This is just what I use, and you can see even within these ATCs there's some differences. This is supposed to give you a little more braking power versus this. I don't really have a preference. Isn't that cool? Look at that. It's all rubbed away. You can tell this has been used. This one's a little bit newer. This is a Black Diamond ATC XP. Guys, a lot of this stuff is pretty old, so I'm sure there's newer equipment out there, but this is what I'm using. Moving on to carabiners. There's kind of 3 that I use, and you know, they all pretty much operate in the same manner. You have the biner itself, you have the gate, which is right here. This one's a locking biner. Again, twisting this up, it prevents the gate from coming open. You'll need at least one of these for sure. Quick draws. Quick draws, if you're not going to lead climb, you don't need quick draws. So this may or may not be something you want to purchase. This, yes. This, not so much. This, not so much. Again, if you're not lead climbing. These are going to go into the bolts as you climb up, and the other end is what you're going to run the rope through. Some of these have bent gates. Again, this is the gate right here, this piece that's opening. It kind of makes it easier to get the rope in. And quantity, I would suggest, if you're going to lead climb, I'd start with at least 5. I think I have maybe 8 here. Yeah, I've got 8 here. And runners. What we use runners for is it's a long piece of webbing, and attached to each end are some biners. And this will go into the chains at the very top of the climb, and this will help run it over a cliff edge, so you're not running your rope right over a sharp edge, which is obviously going to decrease the life of your rope. This stuff's going to be much cheaper than the rope, so it just helps protect the life of your rope, and it prevents that, you know, as that rope goes up and down over the edge, that constant friction, which is really going to tear a rope up, where this just kind of sits on the edge of the cliff. Also, what we use runners for, and this is what I use runners for the vast majority of the time, is when you get to the top of the climb, you take those runners and you clip into the chains that are in the very top, and then you clip them into your harness. That way you can actually untie yourself from the rope, be safe and secure, and then run that rope through those chains. And then reattach it to your harness, and then of course take your runners off and hook them back up to your harness, and you're ready to be let down. Chalk bag. This is a black diamond chalk bag. No frills or thrills on this one. It's pretty basic, and I run a beaner through the back so I can clip it easily on and off. This is the brand of harness I have, Arc'teryx, and I really like this harness. I've worn crappy harnesses before and they work, but boy, they are not comfortable. And as you've seen, where that harness sits on you, it pays to have a comfortable harness. You're going to spend some money on the harness too. That's probably one of the more expensive items. But again, once you guys get into this and get your equipment set up, it's not that expensive. And yes, you will have to replace equipment in time. It does have a life cycle, and that all depends on how much you climb, how often you go, where you're going, how many falls you've taken, or if you've taken a long hard fall, you might want to retire a rope or a specific quick draw, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So what I prefer on my harness, kind of hard to lay this out and get you an idea. So this is where your legs are going, and these two here, this is where your waist is going to go. I want at least 2 places here where I can clip on my quick draws or whatever I have. I want to make sure it has a back loop. They all pretty much do, but some of these just have one, right? One of these pieces. I prefer 2, and I prefer that on both sides. Another thing I like about this one is, see this piece right here? A lot of it, this is around the waist, so it's just pretty much your belt, right? A lot of them will have that down here on the thigh piece. Mine does not. It's just more of this stretchy material right here in the middle, and I much prefer that. Again, here it's reinforced with webbing, double stitch, so if this were to break, no issues. And actually this has held up extremely well with how often I've used it and what I've put it through. It's just one less thing to manage while getting ready, so I prefer not to have the ones that cinch up and you have to double back. Double back meaning, see how it goes through this? When I'm wearing it, this piece needs to go back through and fed through this again. That's called double backing, and that's going to ensure that it doesn't come loose when you're up there wearing it. Here's the middle piece. So this will be right above your crotch here. This piece right here. It's got this loop on it. That's where you're going to attach your locking beaner, and of course this is where your rope's going to run through, and that's about it. So I hope this has been informative for you. Again, this is just intended to give you a basic idea of what you may need to get started climbing. Your needs may differ depending where you are. I've got a lot of climbing opportunities outside. I prefer not to go climbing in the gyms. In fact, 99.5% of my climbing has been done outside and not in the gyms. But again, you may be in an area where a gym is your only choice. So anyway, hope you guys enjoy.